Let's get started. Story number 1.
Liam wasn't the type to throw parties. He was the quiet friend, the one who offered to drive everyone home, the one who kept track of people's drinks to make sure no one went overboard. But when he moved into his late uncle's house outside of Columbus, Ohio, everyone was stunned when he suggested a housewarming party. The house was a two-story colonial built in the 1920s, nestled at the end of a gravel road, surrounded by overgrown trees and a dense, almost unnatural quiet. The house had been vacant for nearly 10 years after his uncle's death. No one wanted it. His family tried to sell it for years but failed, so eventually they passed it down to Liam as an inheritance. He had just graduated, was broke, and needed a place to live. So he took it, despite the rumors. People said his uncle had lost his mind in that house. Neighbors claimed he would be seen talking to empty hallways, boarding up windows that weren't broken, and pacing the attic in the middle of the night. He died alone in the living room, slumped over a chair, eyes wide open, and mouth slightly agape as if frozen mid-scream. Liam didn't believe in any of that. He thought his uncle had suffered from untreated schizophrenia. That's what made the most sense to him. And the house, while old and in desperate need of a deep cleaning, was still structurally sound. So he moved in. 3 weeks later, he invited people over. It wasn't meant to be huge, just a few friends, some drinks, and maybe a fire in the backyard. But word spread, as it always did, and soon his quiet get-together ballooned into something much bigger. By 10 p.m., there were over 40 people inside the house, spilling onto the porch, filling every room with music, laughter, and the scent of weed and cheap beer. The living room was the center of it all. Liam had cleared out his uncle's furniture, most of it dusty and falling apart, and replaced it with camping chairs, an old couch he got off Craigslist, and a coffee table made of stacked milk crates. People danced and shouted over the thump of bass-heavy music, drinks sloshing in red cups. Upstairs, couples wandered off, looking for private corners. Someone even found the attic, which Liam had locked, but the old door apparently gave way with enough pressure. Around 11, the energy shifted. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable. People began moving a little slower. Conversations dipped, then picked back up in forced bursts. It was like the house exhaled all at once. "Do you feel that?" Mara, Liam's ex, asked him. She leaned in close to be heard over the music. "The air feels heavy. Like, I don't know, thick?" Liam glanced around. "Probably just too many people inside." Mara shook her head. "No, it's not that kind of heavy." Before Liam could respond, a guy from his econ class, Troy, stumbled down the stairs, pale and trembling. His drink was gone, hand shaking violently. "Dude," Troy said, grabbing Liam's arm. "There's someone in the attic." Liam frowned. "Yeah, probably. People keep going up there." "No, man," Troy said, his voice cracking. "Not someone from the party. He was just standing there. Didn't say anything. Just watching me. I thought it was like some weird prank or something. So I said, 'What's up?' And he didn't move. Then the door slammed shut behind me." Liam's stomach tightened. "You sure it wasn't just another drunk guy?" he asked. "I swear to God," Troy whispered. His eyes were wrong. "I don't know. They weren't like human." Liam laughed nervously and waved it off. "I'll check it out. Just chill." But inside, he wasn't laughing. He grabbed a flashlight and headed upstairs, pushing past the line of people waiting for the bathroom. The attic door hung slightly ajar. Cold air leaked from the gap, even though the house had been warm all night. He climbed the narrow steps, his shoes creaking on the old wood. The flashlight flickered once as he reached the top. The attic was empty. Dust floated in the beam. There were stacks of boxes, a few covered chairs, and an old mirror leaning against the far wall. Liam stepped fully inside. The door behind him creaked slightly, like it wanted to close. He scanned the room. Nothing. Then he heard it. A breath. Not his. Soft, soft, wet, close. He spun around. No one. The flashlight flickered again, then went out completely. In the silence, he heard something move. Not walk, not shuffle, just move, like flesh dragging against wood. He stumbled back, trying to find the door, panic rising in his throat. Then something brushed past him. He didn't scream, not fully, but he stumbled down the stairs, heart hammering, flashlight dead in his hand. People downstairs laughed when he reappeared, white-faced and silent. "You see the ghost, too?" someone joked. Liam didn't answer. He spent the next hour trying to forget it. He downed 2 drinks, made small talk, and avoided the attic entirely. Music blared. People danced again. The tension seemed to lift. Until 12:23 a.m., that was when all the lights in the house went out. Instant darkness. Someone screamed. Not a playful scream, something sharp and filled with real fear. The music stopped mid-beat. "What the hell?" someone shouted. Liam fumbled for his phone, using the screen to light his way. People turned on their phone lights, creating soft halos of illumination across the rooms. The energy shifted again, this time heavier. People stopped laughing, and then the sounds started. From upstairs, not footsteps, dragging. Slow, wet, deliberate. Someone whispered, "What is that?" Liam turned to find Mara beside him, gripping his arm. "We need to get everyone out of here," she said. Before he could respond, the front door slammed shut on its own. Hard, like someone kicked it from the outside. Then all the phones went dead, screens black. The house went still. No light, no sound. Just breathing, not from the guests, from the house. Liam could feel it, pulsing, like the walls were alive. And then the mirror in the hallway shattered. People screamed, someone shoved past him, trying to find the exit. The panic spread like fire. That's when they saw him. At the top of the stairs, the man from the attic. He wasn't a man. Not really. But too tall. His neck bent at an unnatural angle. His arms too long, fingers dragging against the banister. His face wasn't a face. It was stretched too tight across a skull that seemed to be smiling. Not with joy, but hunger. And his eyes, 2 pits of darkness, not black, but empty. He didn't move. Just watched. One girl fainted. Another tried to scream, but made no sound. Then he vanished. Just blinked out. And the lights flickered back on. Phones lit up. Music blasted for half a second, then stopped again. People rushed for the door, pushing and yelling. No one tried to be polite. They just wanted out. Within minutes, the house was empty. All except Liam. He stood in the hallway, staring at the stairs. The attic door was open again, and something inside was breathing. He left that night and never came back. He stayed with Mara for 2 weeks, barely speaking. He tried to rationalize it, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw that face, that not quite face. He could still hear the dragging sound, feel the cold air. 3 weeks later, he returned with a locksmith and 2 friends. The attic was empty, but behind the mirror that had shattered, they found something. A door. Narrow. Hidden. Not on any blueprint. It led to a crawl space where they found old photographs, dozens of them, of children. Some missing. Some with names written in red ink. Some scratched out entirely. They also found a journal belonging to his uncle. The entries were fragmented. He lives in the walls. He speaks when the lights go out. He wants new faces. The last entry, dated 2 days before his uncle's death, simply read, "I tried to leave the attic door locked. I tried. God help whoever opens it next." Liam sold the house to a company that specialized in property reclamation. They tore it down 6 months later. But the workers said the attic door never came off the hinges. Every time they tried, it was back in place the next morning. Eventually, they buried it under concrete. Nothing has been built on that land since. But sometimes people walking past at night swear they hear music. Faint, echoing, like a party that never ended. And sometimes they see lights flicker behind the trees. Story the end.
Story number 2.
Everyone always thought Briarwood was a boring suburb. Rows of identical 2-story houses, trimmed hedges, and families who waved politely but kept to themselves. It was safe, clean, and lifeless. The kind of place where nothing bad ever really happened. That's probably why we didn't think twice about throwing a party there. It was October, senior year of college, and our friend Leah had just inherited her aunt's house. Her aunt had passed away suddenly, and the property was left to Leah as the only living relative. It was a big old Victorian-style home sitting at the end of a cul-de-sac surrounded by newer homes. The paint was peeling, the shutters hung crooked, and the lawn looked like it hadn't been touched in years. But it had character, and more importantly, no neighbors close enough to complain about noise. Leah said she didn't know her aunt that well. Her mom had been estranged from that side of the family, but when the lawyers called, she figured why not check it out. The place still had old furniture, antique mirrors, and shelves lined with dusty books and porcelain dolls. Honestly, it looked like something out of a horror movie, but to us, it was perfect. We joked about ghosts and seances, but nobody took it seriously. The party was meant to be low-key. A few friends, some drinks, music, maybe a round of cards in the dining room that still smelled faintly of mothballs and dust. But word spread. People invited people, who invited more people, and by 9 p.m. there were close to 40 of us roaming the creaky hallways and wandering upstairs like we owned the place. The stereo was blasting in the living room, bottles clinked, voices echoed off high ceilings, and someone even found an old gramophone in the study and tried to play it. The air had that hazy, electric feeling of youth and invincibility. But underneath it all, something felt wrong, just a little off, like the walls were listening. I first noticed it when I went upstairs to use the bathroom. The hallway was narrow, the wallpaper peeling in long, curling strips. I passed a room that Leah had warned us not to go into, the one her aunt used as a sewing room. She'd said that the door was stuck shut, maybe warped with time. But as I walked by, I swear I heard something behind it. Not voices exactly, more like breathing, slow and deliberate. I paused, leaning closer, but the noise stopped. Back downstairs, people were joking about the weird vibe. A girl named Danny said she felt like someone had followed her upstairs. A guy named Marcus said he saw someone staring out of the attic window when he pulled up to park. We laughed it off, saying we were just psyching ourselves out. It was an old house, after all. Old houses made noise. But things got weirder. Around 10:30, the lights flickered. Just for a second, but enough that everyone noticed. Someone joked about ghosts, and someone else laughed, but then the stereo stopped. Dead silence. We checked it, thinking it had come unplugged, but it was still on, just not playing. No static, no sound. Then the mirrors started fogging, not just in the bathroom, every mirror in the house, even the small decorative ones in the hallway. People started to take notice. You could see condensation forming like someone had just stepped out of a hot shower, except the house was cold, almost uncomfortably so. It felt like the temperature had dropped 10 degrees in minutes. That's when Sarah screamed. She had gone upstairs to get her coat, said she felt like something was behind her. She turned to look in the hallway mirror and saw a face. Not her own. It was pale, with dark, hollow eyes and a twisted mouth stretched in a grin that didn't look human. People rushed upstairs, but by the time they got there, she was sitting on the floor, crying and shaking. "It touched me," she kept saying. "It whispered in my ear." Someone called for an Uber, then another, but no rides were showing up, not one. The app kept saying no drivers available, which was unheard of in our area. We figured we'd sleep it off, maybe call it a night. Then Max went missing. He'd gone upstairs with his girlfriend to find somewhere quiet. When she came down alone 20 minutes later, pale and frantic, she said he'd gone to the attic to check out the view. She'd waited for him to come back, but he never did. She called his name, looked around, but the attic was empty. We all searched the house. Every room, every closet, even the basement, which Leah had kept locked for some reason. She found the key, and we descended as a group, expecting to find Max passed out drunk or pulling a prank. But he wasn't there. What we did find was worse. The basement was massive, with a low ceiling and dirt floor. In the center of the room was a wooden chair. It looked like something out of a mental hospital, with restraints on the arms and legs. Chains hung from the walls, and in one corner was a pile of broken mirrors, every one of them shattered. Leah went pale. "I didn't know about this," she said. "I swear I've never been down here." And then the door slammed shut behind us. We ran to it, yanking, pulling. It wouldn't budge. No one had touched it. The lock clicked from the other side. That's when we started hearing the crying. It echoed through the basement, not coming from one direction but all around us. A woman's voice, soft and broken. Then it turned to screaming, raw, animalistic. People panicked. Danny started praying. Marcus pounded on the door until his hands bled. Leah just stood in the corner staring at the broken mirrors. She looked gone, like she wasn't really there anymore. The lights in the basement were dim, but enough to see our faces. We stood in a tight circle, back to back, as the screams grew louder. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Dead silence. The door creaked open. We bolted, all of us. Ran upstairs, out the front door, into the yard. No one waited for an explanation. We just left. Leah moved out a week later, said she wanted nothing more to do with the house. I believed her. The cops never found Max. There was no sign of him, no blood, no struggle. It was like he vanished. That was 4 years ago. Every now and then I still dream about the house. I see the fogged mirrors and the pale face smiling back at me, and sometimes late at night when I'm lying in bed, I swear I hear the same crying from the basement, even though I live miles away. I tried to forget. We all did. But last week, I drove past the cul-de-sac. The house was boarded up, paint stripped by time and weather. A sign out front read, "For sale as is." And in the attic window, behind the cracked glass, I saw someone standing there, watching. Story the end.
Story number 3.
When we planned the house party, none of us thought about the house itself. It was just supposed to be a night of music, cheap beer, and bad dancing. Sam's cousin had a place. Some huge, dusty colonial house just outside of Asheville, North Carolina, that she hadn't visited in years. She offered it up for the weekend. No strings attached. Said it used to belong to her grandfather, but no one had touched it since he died back in the late 90s. Her parents kept the place, but it was basically abandoned. We didn't ask many questions. It had 4 bedrooms, a giant wraparound porch, and sat back off a long gravel road surrounded by trees. That was all we needed to know. There were 9 of us that Friday night. Sam, of course. He was the one who organized the whole thing. I was there with my girlfriend, Erin. Our friend Tyler brought his new girl, Naomi, who none of us had met before. Then there was Jess, Austin, and Drew. All old friends. And then Tony and Chelsea, who were both already drunk by the time we got there. We pulled up just after sunset. The house was as creepy as you'd expect. Tall, faded white with peeling paint, half the shutters hanging loose, the kind of place you'd dare someone to walk into on Halloween. Still, once we got inside and set up the speakers and coolers, it started to feel like our place, just for the night. By 10, the music was thumping through the walls. The living room had been mostly cleared out, leaving plenty of room to dance. Someone lit candles in the dining room since the overhead lights didn't work. We opened windows to let in the breeze and lined the porch railing with string lights Tyler had brought. For a while, it was exactly what we wanted. Cheap beer, music loud enough to feel in your chest, and nowhere else to be. But around midnight, things started to change. It was subtle at first. The music glitched. Just a tiny hiccup, like someone scratched a record. Nobody cared. Then the lights flickered. We joked about it being a haunted house, laughing it off like idiots. But the air inside the house started to get cold. Not a breeze, something deeper than that. Like the cold was coming from the walls. Erin and I were dancing in what used to be the dining room when she stopped and grabbed my hand. "Do you feel that?" "What?" "It just got freezing." I glanced around. She wasn't wrong. My skin had goosebumps and I could see her breath faintly in the candlelight. I looked toward the hallway and noticed something strange. One of the candles we had set on the windowsill had gone out. There wasn't any wind. "Let's go check the kitchen," I said. I figured maybe the draft was stronger there. The kitchen was empty. The room had this stale, sour smell, like rotting wood and something else, something coppery. It reminded me of pennies soaked in vinegar. There were puddles of old water under the sink and something dripping slowly in the corner. But what stood out was the door next to the pantry. It was open. We hadn't noticed it before. It led to the basement. "Nope," Erin said immediately, pulling me back. I laughed. "Yeah, I'm good." But as we backed away, we both heard it, something down there. A shuffling sound. Slow, like bare feet dragging across cement. We told the others, but nobody really listened. They were too far gone. Jess laughed it off and even dared Austin to go down there. He pretended to consider it, then flipped everyone off and took another swig from his bottle. That's when Chelsea said she saw someone upstairs. We all stopped. She was standing at the foot of the staircase, holding a half-full cup of rum and Coke, pointing upward. "There was someone standing up there," she said. "I swear to God. Like, just watching us." Sam looked up the stairs. "Probably just your reflection in that hallway mirror." "There's no mirror up there," she said. Everyone got quiet. Chelsea wasn't the type to scare easily. She was the first to volunteer for every haunted house, every horror movie. She didn't spook, but her face was pale and her hand trembled just a little as she lowered her drink. Sam tried to keep things moving, called for shots, turned up the music again, but the vibe had shifted. Around 12:30, the music died completely. The speaker just stopped. We checked it. No power. Our phones were all glitching too. Screens freezing, music apps crashing, battery bars draining faster than normal. Then the smell hit. It came from the hallway. It was thick, cloying, like something dead. Naomi gagged and covered her face. Drew muttered something about a broken pipe or sewage, but none of us wanted to admit how wrong it felt, like it wasn't a smell from this world. And then came the knock. One sharp knock at the front door. Then silence. We all turned and stared. No one moved. Expecting someone, Jess joked weakly. Sam walked to the door and opened it. No one was there, but the porch light flickered, then blew out completely. We were plunged into darkness. Then a second knock, this time from the back door, and immediately after, footsteps upstairs. Not one person, multiple, like a group walking slowly across the floorboards. Chelsea screamed, "I told you! I saw someone up there!" Everyone rushed to the living room, forming a circle like that would somehow protect us. Tyler grabbed the fireplace poker. Erin held my hand like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. Someone, maybe Jess, called out, "Who's up there?" No answer. Only footsteps, and then the sound of something being dragged. Heavy. Rhythmic. Tony had had enough. He stormed up the stairs before anyone could stop him, yelling something about this being a joke. We waited. 1 minute, 2. Then we heard it. Not a scream. A crunch. Like something snapping, and then silence. Jess started crying. Sam told everyone to stay put and followed Tony upstairs, poker still in hand. I could see the tension in his back as he moved, like every muscle was braced for impact. Then he called down, "Guys, you need to see this." We hesitated, but eventually we followed. Tony was lying at the end of the hall, unconscious. His leg was twisted wrong, like it had been wrenched sideways at the knee. His face was pale, eyes half-lidded. "He's breathing," Sam said, "but I found him like this. No one else up here. No sign of a fall." Erin helped check his pulse. He was alive, but cold. Sweating. And when she tried to move him, he let out a low moan. We carried him downstairs. Sam tried calling 911, but no signal. None of us had any service. The house, which had had reception earlier in the night, had become a dead zone. That's when Naomi noticed the footprints coming from the basement. Wet, muddy, human-shaped. Barefoot. They trailed through the kitchen into the hallway and disappeared near the base of the stairs. But they didn't go upstairs. They just vanished. We tried to leave then. Packed up, carried Tony between us. But the front door wouldn't open. I mean, literally wouldn't open. The knob turned, but the door didn't budge. Same with the back door. The windows were painted shut and wouldn't break, even when Drew threw a chair into one of them. We were trapped, and the house knew it. The rest of the night is hard to explain. The lights flickered constantly. Shadows moved on their own. More than once, I saw someone standing in a hallway mirror, someone tall with no face, just a gaping hole where the mouth should be. Erin saw her reflection smile back at her while she was crying. We all ended up huddled in the living room, every candle lit, doors blocked with furniture. It didn't feel like it was enough. The house groaned like it was breathing. And sometimes we heard whispers right behind our ears, like someone leaning in. Tony woke up once, just long enough to say he lives in the walls before passing out again. No one slept. Around 6 a.m., the power came back. Phones started working. The doors unlatched like nothing had ever happened. We carried Tony to the car. Sam drove him to the hospital. The rest of us left in silence. No one said goodbye. Tony was in a cast for 3 months. He doesn't remember what happened upstairs. Chelsea moved out of state. Jess stopped talking to most of us. Naomi and Tyler broke up 2 weeks later. Erin and I stayed together, but we never talked about that night again. Not really. Not in full. But I still dream about it. Sometimes I wake up to the sound of dragging, the same slow, wet scrape across the floorboards. I keep my phone charged, I leave lights on. I don't go to parties anymore, especially not in old houses, and sometimes in the mirror I see him standing behind me, smiling. Story the end.
Story number 4.
It started with a text, just a casual message on a Thursday afternoon from my old high school friend Nate. "Yo, house party at Sarah's this Saturday. Her cousin moved out. Place is empty. You down?" I hadn't seen Nate in months, and I didn't know Sarah well, but I didn't have plans, so I replied with a thumbs up and a simple bet. The house was out in Greystone, a quiet, mostly forgotten part of our town where the streetlights flickered and the roads were full of potholes. When I pulled up that night, I realized the place was one of those old craftsman-style homes. 2 stories tall, flaking white paint, a porch that sagged in the middle, and windows so dark you'd think they were painted black. Still, there were cars lined up along the street and music pumping from inside. It was just like any other college party at first. Too many people in too small a space, red Solo cups everywhere, someone already drunk in the kitchen trying to freestyle over the music. Nate met me at the door with a grin and handed me a beer. "You made it. Place is wild, right?" Her cousin bounced last week, left all his weird art and furniture. Kinda creepy, but kinda sick too. I stepped inside. The living room had high ceilings with crown molding that was cracked and yellowing. A massive painting of a woman with a blurred-out face hung above the fireplace, and the walls were covered with old photographs, all slightly crooked. Every picture seemed to be black and white, even ones that should have been in color. Birthday parties, family dinners, people smiling stiffly at the camera with eyes that didn't match their expressions. Something about it made my skin crawl, but I chalked it up to booze and nostalgia. There were at least 40 people crammed into the house. Music thumped from a Bluetooth speaker, and people were smoking out of a homemade gravity bong in the bathtub upstairs. Sarah, the host, was wearing a vintage black dress and a cigarette holder like she was born in another century. She had a weird energy, kind of aloof and almost too calm. When I complimented her on the house, she just smiled and said, "It has a history." By 11, the party had hit that chaotic rhythm. Half the people were drunk or high, someone was crying on the porch, and a couple had locked themselves in the coat closet for privacy. I wandered upstairs with Nate and a few others, curious about the rest of the place. The upstairs hallway had a heavy smell, like old paper and mold. The walls were lined with more photos, and at the end of the hall, a door was padlocked shut. That wasn't too weird. Old houses have locked rooms, but the part that stuck with me was the carving above the frame, etched in messy letters, like by a knife or key. "Stay out." We all saw it. We all laughed nervously. Nate knocked on the door and said something like, "Hey, demons, it's ya boy," and we moved on. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Around midnight, the music suddenly cut out. At first, we thought someone had unplugged the speaker, but it was still connected. The phone was still playing. We turned it off and on. Still no sound. And then, just as suddenly, the lights flickered and went out. Pitch black. People laughed and pulled out their phones, assuming it was a fuse, or maybe the ancient wiring couldn't handle all the speakers and plugs. But even our phones started acting up. Flashlights dimmed. Screens froze. One guy swore his screen went totally black, even though his battery had been at 80%. Sarah lit candles. She had a box of them ready, like she'd been expecting this. I asked her if this had happened before. She nodded slowly. The house doesn't like loud music or new people. I thought she was joking, but her face didn't match her tone. Someone dared another guy, Matt, to open the padlocked room upstairs. They offered him $50 and a bottle of tequila. He shrugged and said, "Why not?" He disappeared upstairs, and within minutes, the house felt different, like the air got heavier. People kept asking where the draft was coming from, even though no windows were open. The candle flames started flickering in unison, like they were reacting to something we couldn't see. Then Matt screamed. Not like a joke scream, a real scream. From the gut. Someone dropped a glass in the kitchen and it shattered. Everyone rushed upstairs, but Matt wasn't there. The door was open. The padlock was on the floor, snapped clean in half. Inside, the room was pitch black, colder than outside in October. No windows, just dust and the smell of old wood. We stepped in together, 5 of us, shoulder to shoulder. There were paintings all over the walls, dozens of them, all of the same woman. Sometimes she was crying, sometimes laughing. In a few, she was covered in blood. But her eyes, they followed you. Nate picked a painting from the floor and showed me the back. Someone had written in pencil, "She's still here. Don't look at her too long." Then we found Matt's phone in the middle of the room, flashlight still on. No sign of him. We searched the house, all of us, every room, every closet, even the crawl space in the basement. Nothing. He was gone. His car was still outside. His jacket still hung on a chair. His keys were in his shoe. Someone called the cops, but there was no signal. Even landlines didn't work. Sarah's cousin had disconnected the phone when he moved out. A couple people decided to drive to the gas station for help. Their car was found the next morning about 2 blocks away, doors open, engine running, no one inside. No footprints, no blood, no broken glass, just empty seats. The party obviously ended. People left in groups, pale and shaky, barely speaking. I stayed with Nate and Sarah, along with a guy named Ryan and 2 girls who were too scared to drive. We sat in the living room, wrapped in blankets, watching the candlelight dance on the walls. At 3:17 a.m., we heard someone walking upstairs. Heavy footsteps, deliberate and slow, back and forth, back and forth. Nate grabbed a kitchen knife and crept toward the staircase. I followed, heart thudding in my ears. We reached the top step and stopped. The hallway was empty, silent, no one there. Then all the pictures on the walls fell at once. Every single one, some shattered, some bounced, but all came down at the exact same moment. Sarah screamed. Ryan ran to the front door, only to find it jammed. It wouldn't open no matter how hard we pulled. Even the windows wouldn't budge. We were trapped. The temperature dropped again, and we could see our breath. That's when we heard the humming. Soft, like a lullaby. It came from the padlocked room. We didn't go back in, none of us. We huddled on the floor of the living room waiting for the sun. When morning came, the doors opened on their own, just clicked and swung wide. Matt was never found. The 2 who drove for help vanished without a trace. No one could explain what happened. The cops thought it was drugs or some elaborate prank gone wrong, but there was no evidence, no damage, no proof. Sarah left town a few days later. She handed the keys to her lawyer and said she never wanted to hear about that house again. Last I heard, she was in New Mexico teaching yoga and refusing to answer questions. Nate moved to Oregon. He still won't talk about it. He won't even say Matt's name. As for me, I stopped going to parties, stopped answering unknown numbers. Sometimes late at night, I wake up to footsteps above me. I live in a 1-story apartment. Once, I tried to find the house again. I drove out to Greystone, down the same winding roads, past the same street signs, but it wasn't there. The whole block was gone, just an empty lot with gravel and weeds, like it never existed. Story the end.
Story number 5.
It was the kind of house party that wasn't supposed to happen. Last minute, barely planned, word of mouth only, and fueled by a combination of boredom and the strange sense of freedom that hits at the end of fall semester in college. Everyone was about to leave town for the holidays, and someone, Jake, I think, said, we should send it one more time before break. And somehow that turned into 30 people showing up at this half-renovated farmhouse just outside of town. The place had been sitting empty for years. It was owned by the family of a girl named Caroline, who none of us knew all that well, but who said her uncle had left the house in her mom's name when he passed. He'd been kind of a hermit, she told us. Lived out there for decades, hardly came into town, didn't talk to neighbors. When he died, the family didn't even bother to clean the place out. They just padlocked the doors and left it alone. It sat untouched for almost 6 years. When Caroline got the idea to throw a party there, she told us she'd already talked her mom into giving her a set of keys. Just to look around, maybe fix it up. The electricity worked, and the plumbing too, even if the place needed repairs. So she invited about 10 people. Then someone else told a few more. By the time I pulled up with 2 of my friends, Jesse and Talia, there were already cars lining both sides of the gravel road. The house was bigger than I expected. Old, boxy, probably built in the 1920s. It sat low to the ground like it had sunk a little over the years. One side of the porch sagged enough that someone had jammed cinder blocks under it to hold it up. The siding was cracked and chipped, and most of the windows were coated in grime or sealed with plastic from the inside. Still, when the front door opened and the sound of music spilled out, it felt like a party. Inside, it smelled like dust and leftover time. But someone had brought candles. Christmas lights were strung across the living room, and there was already a cooler full of drinks in the corner. Music came from a portable speaker hooked up to someone's phone. People stood in clusters, leaning against walls, sitting on the floor, laughing too loud. Everyone was trying to pretend it wasn't freezing. The house creaked constantly, like it was surprised to have people inside again. Caroline looked half drunk already, holding a solo cup and telling a story to a group of people that included Jake and a few girls I didn't recognize. I caught her eye, waved, and she grinned and waved back before disappearing into the kitchen. Jesse and Talia went off to find drinks, and I wandered through the house. There was something off about it from the beginning, but I couldn't name it. Just this quiet pressure, like you were being watched, even in a room full of people. The hallways were too narrow, and the ceilings too low, as if the house had settled in on itself over time. I ended up in a small back room that used to be an office. The desk was still there, covered in a thick sheet of dust. Someone had stacked beer bottles along the windowsill like trophies. A pile of old papers sat on the floor, handwritten notes, receipts, notebooks filled with the kind of small, tight cursive you don't see anymore. I picked one up and flipped through it. It wasn't a diary, not exactly, just pages of disconnected phrases and numbers, some repeated again and again. Not alone. Not alone. Not alone. Don't go downstairs. I put the notebook back. A girl I didn't know came into the room behind me and paused like she'd forgotten what she was doing. Her eyes darted toward the hallway. Did you hear that? I shook my head. What? That banging noise. Like, in the floor. I think someone's down in the basement. I looked down. The floorboards were warped and uneven, and the whole room tilted slightly toward one corner. From where I stood, I couldn't hear anything. She tilted her head. It stopped now, but it was weird. I nodded and left the room. She didn't follow. Back in the kitchen, Jesse handed me a cup. Talia's upstairs. They found a room with this weird doll collection, like hundreds of them, still in their boxes. Seriously? He nodded. She's taking pictures. We went upstairs. The second floor was colder, way colder, and dark, like none of the bulbs worked. The hallway had 3 doors on one side, one at the end, and a narrow stairway leading to what looked like an attic. I found Talia in the second room on the left. She was laughing, holding her phone up, taking photos of a tall wooden shelf full of porcelain dolls. They're all the same, she said, flipping one of the boxes over. Same name on all of them. Annalise. There were at least 30 dolls, all with pale faces, dark eyes, and thin braids tied with red ribbon. Same outfit, same expression. I noticed something then. Each box had a little slip of paper taped to the bottom. Talia peeled one off. It was handwritten, just like the notebooks. She only wants company. Jesse grabbed one and read it aloud. She gets lonely when it's quiet. This is actually messed up. Then we all heard it. A single knock from above, from the attic. We froze. Jesse looked up the narrow stairway. It was roped off with yellowing tape, like someone had tried to block it off decades ago. I'm not going up there, he said immediately. But we heard it again. A knock, then a dragging sound. Let's just go back downstairs, I said. As we turned to leave, all the lights on the second floor flickered on at once, harsh, buzzing light, like old fluorescence. The dolls looked different under it, sharper, their faces less soft. One of them had a crack running down her cheek I swore wasn't there before. We didn't run, we didn't scream, but we got downstairs fast. The party had shifted. People were quieter. The music had stopped. In the living room, Caroline was sitting on the floor, staring into space. Jake sat beside her, shaking his head slowly. What happened? I asked. Jake looked up. We lost power for like 5 minutes. The whole place went black. When it came back, we couldn't find Carly. You know Carly, Caroline's roommate? I nodded. She went outside to smoke, and now she's just gone. We've been looking for her. No one saw her leave. Caroline whispered. She was at the window. I saw her, standing outside, just staring in. Okay, I said slowly. So maybe she went home? Jake shook his head. Her car's still here. We all looked at each other. No one had anything else to say. Around 1 a.m, people started leaving. Not in big groups, 1 or 2 at a time. Most of them didn't say goodbye. They just walked out into the cold and got into their cars. Some never came back in. The party drained like water through a cracked floor. Eventually, there were only 6 of us left. Me, Jesse, Talia, Caroline, Jake, and a guy named Marcus who hadn't said much all night. We all agreed to stay together just for the night. It was too late to drive, and no one wanted to walk outside alone. We set up in the living room, using sleeping bags and cushions from the couch. Jesse stayed up to keep watch. At 3:13 a.m., the banging started. From below us. From the basement. 3 slow knocks, then silence, then 3 more. We all sat up. Is there anyone down there? Jesse asked. No one's been down there, Caroline said. I never even opened the door. But the sound kept coming. Not just banging now, but footsteps. Then something that sounded like someone dragging their nails across wood. Then we heard a voice, faint, female, like a whisper directly into your ear. I miss you. Talia started crying. Caroline backed into the corner of the room. I didn't open it, she said. I swear to God I didn't. Jessie grabbed a flashlight and went to the basement door. It wasn't locked. It wasn't even latched, just a thin wooden door slowly creaking open on its own. I'm not going down there, he said, but we need to close it. He pushed the door shut. It didn't latch. Behind it, the whispering started again. We sat there until dawn, huddled together. No one slept. No one said a word. By morning, the house was silent again. The whispers stopped. The banging was gone. Carly's car was still outside. They never found her. The police came that afternoon. Caroline told them she thought Carly had wandered off. Got lost in the woods. Maybe she'd been drinking. Maybe she tripped. Search dogs couldn't pick up a scent. The house is empty again now. Still standing. Caroline doesn't talk about that night. Jake transferred schools. Jessie won't come to parties anymore. I drove past the place once, months later. The porch had collapsed completely. Every window was blacked out, but someone had lined the inside of the windows with dolls. All the same, all with red ribbons.
Story number 6.
It was a Friday night in early October when Nadia decided to throw a house party. She had just moved into an old 3-story Victorian house in a quiet corner of Maryland, inherited from an aunt she barely remembered. The house sat back from the road, surrounded by oak trees and hedges that had long overgrown into one another. From the outside, it looked like something from a storybook, complete with turrets and creaky wooden floors. Inside, it smelled faintly of dust and something metallic, like rust or old pipes. But it was huge, and best of all, it was hers now. Nadia had spent weeks fixing the place up, sweeping out the cobwebs, replacing curtains, and repainting some of the more water-damaged walls. Her friends joked that it looked haunted, but she brushed it off. It was just old, and it had character. Besides, she'd never believed in ghosts. The party started around 9 p.m., and by 10:30, the house was alive with music, laughter, and the scent of spilled drinks. Dozens of people filled the rooms, friends from college, neighbors, a few coworkers, and strangers brought by friends of friends. Every light in the house was on, and music blared from a Bluetooth speaker in the living room. People danced between the dining room and kitchen, spilled out onto the porch, and even wandered upstairs to explore. Nadia was in the kitchen pouring drinks when Liz, one of her closest friends, came in laughing and a little flushed. Okay, so who's the dude upstairs in the long coat? She asked, reaching for a cup. Nadia blinked. What guy? Upstairs, like second floor. He didn't say anything, just stood at the end of the hall looking like, I don't know, like a funeral director or something. Gave me total goosebumps. Nadia chuckled, assuming someone had shown up in costume or trying to be funny. Weird. Maybe someone snuck in. I'll check it out. She didn't think much of it until she overheard someone else mention the creepy guy on the stairs. A group of people were laughing about it in the hallway, but their voices had that nervous edge that suggested they weren't entirely comfortable. When Nadia finally made her way upstairs, she found nothing unusual. The second floor had 3 bedrooms and a small library. All the doors were open, lights on, and no one matching that description was anywhere in sight. A couple sat cross-legged on the hallway floor, making out. Another guy was passed out on a bed, but no one in a coat. She shook her head, chalked it up to someone playing a prank, and went back down. But the energy had shifted. She couldn't put her finger on it, but something felt slightly off. Around midnight, things got worse. The lights began to flicker. At first, people thought it was part of the party ambiance. But when the Bluetooth speaker cut out with a shrill burst of static and all the lights in the house went out at once, everyone stopped. There was a moment of drunken laughter, followed by quiet. Nadia moved quickly to the kitchen to check the fuse box. She flipped the breakers. Nothing. The power was completely dead. People turned on their phone flashlights and tried to make the best of it, but the mood was different now. Anxious, fidgety. Someone suggested playing a game, maybe telling ghost stories, and people gathered in the living room. They lit candles. Someone passed around a bottle of whiskey. A girl named Shay started telling a story about a haunted road trip, but people were distracted. More than once, someone turned around suddenly, swearing they heard something behind them. A whisper, a breath. Liz leaned in close to Nadia and whispered, I saw him again. Nadia tensed. Who? The guy, same place, upstairs, just standing there, watching. Nadia looked around the room. Everyone seemed on edge now. A guy named Derek, clearly drunk, stood up and said loudly, All right, I'm finding this creepy bastard. He grabbed a candle and made his way up the stairs while others hooted and followed. Nadia hesitated, but then followed them. They spread out on the second floor, peering into rooms, looking behind curtains. Still nothing. But then Derek screamed. Not a playful scream, something sharp and real. Everyone rushed to the small library room where Derek was standing frozen, candle shaking in his hand. His face was pale, sweat glistening on his forehead. There's someone in the wall, he whispered, behind the bookshelf. People laughed nervously. I swear to God, Derek said, backing away. It moved. I saw a face. Nadia stepped forward, heart pounding, and ran her fingers along the edges of the built-in bookshelf. She pressed against it, and to her surprise, it gave way. It swung open slowly with a moan of old hinges, revealing a narrow, dark passage. There was silence. Then someone let out a low, "Holy shit!" Nadia grabbed a flashlight from someone and shined it inside. The passage was narrow, just wide enough for someone to walk through sideways. Dust floated in the beam of light. The floor was bare wood, with scuff marks like it had been used recently. I'm not going in there, Liz said quickly, backing away. Nadia stared into the dark. Something compelled her. She took a few steps in. The air grew colder the farther she went. The walls were tight, lined with faded wallpaper. After about 20 feet, the passage turned sharply, leading to a narrow wooden staircase that went down. It was then that she realized this was not on the house's blueprints. She turned to call back to the others, but the words stuck in her throat. At the base of the stairs, something moved. A figure, just barely visible, stood in the shadows. He was tall, wearing a long dark coat, hands at his sides. His face was pale, too pale, and his eyes were wide and glassy, almost inhuman. He didn't blink. Nadia froze. Her breath caught in her chest. The man didn't move toward her. He just watched. She stumbled back, nearly dropping the flashlight, and ran out of the passage, shoving the bookcase closed behind her. Everyone was shouting questions, asking what she saw, but she couldn't speak. Her throat felt raw. Her skin was cold and damp. We need to leave, she whispered finally. Some people laughed, but most were ready to go. The party ended in a rush of hushed voices and hurried steps. People collected coats and left in pairs, nervous and looking over their shoulders. Nadia and Liz were the last to go to bed, sleeping with the lights on in the guest room together. In the morning, the power was back. They searched for the secret passage, but the bookcase wouldn't budge. It was like it had sealed itself shut. Even pushing, pulling, and inspecting every edge, they found nothing. I swear it was here, Nadia said. Liz didn't answer. She just nodded, eyes red from lack of sleep. The following days were quiet. The house felt normal again, though Nadia kept every light on, even during the day. She didn't tell anyone else about what she saw. It felt too unreal. Maybe it had been a trick of the light. Maybe her mind had been playing games. Then things started happening again. It began with the smell. That faint metallic scent she'd noticed when she first moved in grew stronger, like old blood. It followed her from room to room, lingering longer than it should. Then the noises began. Soft footsteps above her when she knew no one was upstairs. Whispers in the hallway when she was alone. Doors that opened on their own. One night she woke to find the closet door wide open, though she always kept it shut. She got up to close it, heart pounding, only to hear a creak from inside the closet, as if something had just stepped back, deeper into the shadows. She slammed it shut and pushed a chair in front of it. She began sleeping in the living room. Liz stopped coming over. Others who had been at the party didn't return calls. Derek moved out of state. Then, late one night, Nadia received a text. It was from an unknown number. The message simply read, "Why did you wake him?" Her stomach turned. She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, she found the bookcase slightly ajar, just enough to see a sliver of darkness behind it. That was the last straw. She packed a suitcase and left, drove to her mother's and stayed there for weeks. When she finally returned, it was only to retrieve the rest of her things. She never stayed another night in that house. It was sold within a month to a real estate investor who planned to renovate it into a bed and breakfast. He lasted 3 days before abandoning the project. The house sits empty now, its windows dark, the porch sagging under years of neglect. Locals say it's cursed. Teenagers dare each other to break in, but most come out running, white-faced and shaking. And sometimes late at night, drivers passing by say they see a man in a long coat standing at the upstairs window, watching, waiting. Story the end.
Story number 7.
I was 19 when it happened. It was one of those late summer nights when everyone was itching to do something before school started up again and the air turned cold. My friend Jared had just moved into a new rental house on the edge of town, a dusty, slightly run-down old colonial that looked like it had once been a beautiful family home, but now sat like a relic with peeling white paint and a sagging porch swing that creaked with the wind. Jared's parents had co-signed the lease, figuring it was better than a dorm, and he was proud as hell to be out on his own. His housewarming party was all anyone could talk about that week. It wasn't supposed to be huge, just some of our close friends, maybe 10 or 12 people, drinking beers in the living room and playing music on a cheap Bluetooth speaker. But you know how word gets around. By 9, there were at least 30 people in the house. I remember the floorboards groaned under the weight of all of us, and the walls seemed to lean in slightly like they were trying to listen. I didn't pay it much attention at the time. Everyone was laughing, the lights were low, and the scent of weed and cheap vodka filled the air. People had spread out, some on the porch, others in the kitchen, or tucked away in bedrooms upstairs. I noticed the first strange thing when I went to the bathroom around 10. The house had 2 bathrooms, one downstairs and one at the end of the hall upstairs. The line for the downstairs one was long, so I wandered up. The upstairs hallway was narrow, with faded blue carpet and family photos still nailed to the walls, even though Jared swore the house had been empty for a year before he moved in. I remember stopping in front of one photo. It showed a young woman with a round face and curly hair holding a baby. They both stared straight into the camera. But the thing was, the woman's face had been scratched out. Not blurred or water damaged, but scratched deliberately with something sharp. The baby's face was untouched. I felt uneasy looking at it, like I had seen something I wasn't supposed to. When I finally made it to the bathroom, I locked the door behind me and turned on the light. The room smelled faintly of mildew, and the mirror above the sink was slightly fogged, even though no one had showered. I wiped it with my sleeve and looked at myself. That's when I saw her. For a brief second, so fast I thought I was seeing things, there was a woman standing behind me in the reflection. She wasn't there in the room, only in the mirror. Her mouth was open like she was screaming, and her eyes were so wide they looked like they might pop from her head. Her dress was soaked, dripping water down the front. I turned around instantly. Nothing. I opened the door, heart pounding, and stared down the hallway. There was no one there. Just the quiet hum of the party echoing from downstairs. I told myself I imagined it. Maybe I was more drunk than I thought. When I came back down, Jared was in the kitchen, arguing with someone about the basement. "I told you not to go down there, man," he said to a guy I didn't know, who was holding a can of beer and laughing. "I didn't go down, swear to God. I opened the door, but it was pitch black, looked creepy as hell. I shut it and bounced." Jared turned to me. "You been down there?" I shook my head. "You said not to." He leaned in. "I've heard shit coming from down there, like footsteps, but there's nothing down there. I looked when I moved in, just junk and old tools." Someone else wandered by and said they heard something too. That's when I started listening more closely. Sure enough, if you were quiet, you could hear something, like a soft thump, 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 barely audible under the sound of music and chatter. The party kept going, but the mood had shifted. People started talking about the house. Some swore the upstairs lights had turned off on their own. One girl said the bathroom door slammed shut when she was inside and she couldn't get it open for a full 5 minutes. Others said they'd seen someone moving in the hallway, only there'd be no one there when they checked. I saw a guy standing by the basement door, staring at it like he was in a trance. When I tapped his shoulder, he jumped and looked at me like he didn't recognize me. "She's downstairs," he mumbled. "Who?" He shook his head. "I don't know. She's down there." That was enough for a few people to start leaving. One by one, the party trickled down. By midnight, it was just a handful of us. Me, Jared, his girlfriend Emily, and two other friends, Tommy and Claire. We shut off the music, poured ourselves new drinks, and sat in the living room. Jared kept glancing toward the hallway. Finally, he said, "I didn't want to say anything, but something's not right about this place." We waited. "The first night I moved in, I woke up to the sound of crying," he said. "I thought it was from outside, maybe a neighbor. But then I realized it was coming from the vents." Emily leaned in. "You didn't tell me that." He looked at her. "Because I didn't want to freak you out. I've heard it almost every night. A woman crying, and sometimes footsteps. Not above, like someone in the attic, but below. In the basement." Claire whispered, "Did you check?" "I did. I went down there with a flashlight. It's just junk. Boxes, old tools, a broken washing machine, but I felt something down there." We sat in silence. Tommy stood up. "All right, I'm going down there." "Don't," Jared said, but Tommy was already walking toward the hallway. We followed him. He opened the basement door slowly. The air that came out was cold, stale. He turned on his phone light and started down. "Tommy," Jared warned. "Don't." Too late. He was already halfway down. Then we heard him say, "There's water down here." We froze. He kept talking. "It's all wet. He stopped. We waited. "Tommy?" Emily called. No answer. Jared grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen and started down the stairs. I followed him. Emily and Claire stayed behind. When we reached the bottom, the basement was exactly as Jared described. Boxes, old furniture, tools. But the floor was wet, not flooded, but damp, like it had rained inside. "Tommy?" Jared called. Then we saw him, in the far corner, standing completely still, staring at the wall. "What the hell are you doing?" Jared asked. Tommy didn't move. I walked over and touched his shoulder. He turned to me, slowly. He was crying. "She's behind the wall," he whispered. "What?" He pointed to the bricks. "She's inside. They put her inside the wall." Jared and I exchanged a glance. We were about to pull him away when we heard something. A knock. Coming from inside the wall. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. We ran. Back upstairs, slamming the basement door behind us. We dragged a chair in front of it and sat in silence, panting. None of us slept that night. At some point around dawn, we saw water leaking from the base of the basement door. By morning, we left. Jared packed a bag and said he was going to stay with Emily. He said he'd figure out what to tell the landlord later. The next day, I did some digging, went to the county records office just to see if anything had happened there. Turns out in 1982, a woman named Lillian Grant had lived there with her husband and baby daughter. The daughter disappeared one night, never found. 2 weeks later, Lillian was found dead in the basement. She had drowned. They said it was an accident, that she had fallen into a backed-up drain and hit her head. But there were rumors. People said she was unstable, that she blamed her husband for the baby's disappearance, that she believed he had hidden the child somewhere in the house. Some say she was searching for her baby when she died. Some say she never left. Jared never went back to the house. He broke the lease and left most of his things behind. The landlord didn't fight it. He probably knew. Probably hoped someone else would move in, pretend it was just another old house with creaky floors and drafty walls. But I remember those knocks and the look in Tommy's eyes. Sometimes I hear knocking at night too. Always 3. Story the end.